It's that time of year again, and Fishing the DMV is proud to announce its next major tournament, the Merry Bassmas Bash on Tourney X. Registration is open now and it closes December 15th. I am guaranteeing $400 for the first place angler, $200 for the second place angler, $100 for the third place angler. And to get in the Christmas spirit of things, I am giving away $100 for the biggest smallmouth caught in Pennsylvania, the biggest smallmouth caught in Virginia, the biggest smallmouth caught in Maryland, and I'm giving away $100 for the biggest largemouth caught and the second biggest largemouth caught as well. And if we get over 40 people to sign up, I'm going to increase the prizes for everything. Again, registration is now open and it closes December 15th. And you have to be a Patreon member to join this tournament. All Patreon supporters will receive 5% off their orders to Jake's Bait and Tackle, 10% off their orders to Tiger Crankbaits, 10% off their orders to Catoctin Creek Rods. They'll also gain access to our private Facebook group community, loads of members-only content, and of course, access to the Bassmas Bash on Tourney X. Ho, ho, ho. See you there.
You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens, and today I have on Dave Hart of the Tarheel Lunkers. They're based out of Central and North Carolina. We're here to unveil just their season as a whole, what their organization has done, and also people have been clamoring for me to kind of start dipping my toe into North Carolina more. There's so many lakes. And I'm surprised that there's not a lot of people down there that actually just cover some of those little gems. It's like if there's not a BFL or a Toyota, people are like, oh, these lakes suck. And from what I learned in Virginia, there's a lot of places that you can just go and have fun fishing, especially with kayaking. You can have these catch, measure, release tournaments on some pretty cool ass places that don't get touched. So thank you so much for coming on this morning. I really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Happy to be here. Like I said, we had an awesome year. Wanted to kind of showcase it. And, I've been watching your podcast for a while now. I know like our region of the team series, which I'll get into, kind of dips into Virginia quite a bit and there's some overlap, but kind of had a hunch that, let's talk North Carolina a little bit. What's going on down here, what's coming up. So happy to talk anything you want to. Really appreciate you and your podcast. I've been watching. I really appreciate kind of the scientific nature you bring to it, some of the biologists you have on, the lobbyists, all that stuff. Because it's, just so you know too, it's like we're watching here. I know a lot of what you've talked about is in Virginia, Maryland, but obviously we have our own issues with the fisheries commissions and things like that, especially on the saltwater side. But I just love to listen on. And we all come up and fish Virginia waters, Maryland waters. So excited to just see how this goes and dive into it.
One perk is just, since I'm on the board for Maryland, I get to hear the other states is North Carolina trying to push to bring back SAV and vegetation in a lot of their lakes. Will it happen? Who knows? But at least it's a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and right down the road, Seth Micah, one of the guys spearheading it, I know there was an article just put out. Heck, he's 20 minutes down the road. He is doing a lot to spearhead that. And it's, it's a marathon. He'll be the first to admit it. There's been success stories. And of course, as you know, every lake's different. So he's kind of focusing on, it's all native vegetation, obviously, but what would work best for certain bodies of water that may need it, whether it's, just to have habitat, whether it's to kind of curtail, a lot of it's erosion on some of our smaller lakes that don't have a horsepower restriction. I know that's one of his big goals is to one of our juicy little municipal lakes around here. He wants to get water willow up and down the thing to kind of curtail some of that. So.
They need to do more studies, and maybe it's because it's trust fund babies and lawyers that own it, but what wake boats have done to our fisheries, because you always want to say like the bass boat angler is the issue. And I've never felt more in danger than when you have 3 or 4 people doing circles in the middle of the lake.
I cut my teeth on Caddo Lake in a kayak, and I can attest to the puckering instances I've had up there. It's gotten a lot better, but that's you see it there more than anything. It's 100% the jet skis, the wake boats. Now that they do the little rooster tail slow rolling thing. It's devastating. You see all those undercut banks and roots exposed, and it's a real issue.
How did you get involved in this? Were you always were you on the first wave of people to adopt kayak angling? Were you a transfer from the bass boats?
Actually, no. I've been in a bass boat twice in my life that I can count. And, typical story, grew up like, dad had us fishing occasionally, nothing too crazy, just on camping trips, whatever, bank fishing. Slowly progressed, have two uncles, aunts and uncles actually in the Winchester, Virginia area that were big into fishing. That was like my aha moment, like saw rods lined up on the wall and tackle for days. Got invited to go out, couldn't sleep. And then one thing left another, just fishing more from the bank stuff. The kayak thing started after college. So I'd fly fished in college. I was up in the mountains and did all that. But when I moved back here to Central North Carolina, my wife's father-in-law just had a cheap old little Walmart kayak, and I'd take it out. They have a house up on Hyco, and started learning it. Got more interested, and then started seeing the scene kind of blow up. It was probably 2018, 2019, but really didn't get. I got in the first tournament late 2020, and I was hooked. And so progressively, updated the kayak and fished all the trails here locally as much as I could. And then got into the team thing. So really just, I think it was the explosion kind of, right before the pandemic, kind of during the pandemic when people got out. I was kind of definitely part of that.
And then how did you get with the organization that you're with now, that, the Tarheel Lunkers? And for people, since I do have a lot of bass boat guys that listen in, what is this part of Hobie Bass? What is this a part of?
So it's actually a totally separate entity. So kind of how I can break it down from the bass boat guys, like anywhere you have your local grassroots trails. We have several here in the state. We can get into later if you want. That's kind of where guys started. There's been some, early as, trying to think, Carolina Kayak Anglers were probably the first. I think way back in 2013, they started out of the Greensboro area. But so guys were fishing local trails, and then, obviously the Hobie BOS. Well, before that, KBF came on board. That was kind of the popular national trail at the time. Hobie BOS came on, then Bassmaster came on, and you started getting more of the national events. Mm-hmm. So it's actually a gentleman up in the Maryland, Northern Virginia. I'll withhold his name because he doesn't want to get blown up, but I got to give him all the credit in the world. He came up with this concept of team kayak fishing. So in the kayak world, obviously we're catch, photo, release. We don't have live wells. Can't put the cooler live wells like John boats can. So we do catch, photo, release by length. I know you're accustomed to that. Most of you guys are. But he thought, let's try this team thing, because you can kind of spread out. You can, kind of fish solo, but maybe fish part of a team, maybe a little easier than you can on a bass boat. So his concept came about, I want to say it was 2020, 21, I think, is probably when KFL started, as Kayak Fishing League. It was modeled 100% around kind of the NFL. So he had like divisions. You played 1 versus 1 matchups. It was total length for your best 10 fish. He upped it a little bit, so it was a little harder, where we did a 14-inch minimum instead of a 12-inch minimum, which is kind of standard. Because we wanted, he wanted the best of the best. He wanted to really make it a challenge, and so it was a great concept. People really, grasped onto it. I think, like anything, it's like you want to grow so fast, and I think he grew a little too fast, made some poor decisions, and ultimately, it's just too much on his plate, personally to manage it. And it really, even managing a local trail, being a tournament director is insane, but to do it nationally and to do it for a team, you just, you expound on how many people you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. So anyways, much like the bass circuit world, like, the idea was to get your teams to have sponsors, mostly, non-endemic, but some have, obviously, some of the companies in the kayak world. So it was very successful. It grew very rapidly. I think going into what would have been the third year, they were looking at like 22 to 26 teams, wow. Basically anywhere from the Mississippi River east and all the way from Florida up to Maine. I think the challenge with that and why it didn't work, I think, one, it grew too fast, and two, the travel component, which I thought it was really cool, like the NFL style, where like you would play 1 or 2 games out of your division, so to speak, and our guys loved it. Like it like, for instance, like our guys went down to Headwaters Lake when it had first opened and got to experience that down in Florida. We went to Neely Henry down in Alabama. Great experiences, but a big hit on the wallet. Even, again, we're not talking huge pay-ins for kayaks, but when you're sending a whole team of guys with the travel, the trailers, the gas, the VRBO, it added up and it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then the last thing I think was just too much on the postseason. Again, like NFL, you would kind of have a seeding at the end of the year based on your record, and you weren't getting any payouts during that season other than just a record. So if you advance to the postseason, let's call it that, you basically, it was like a playoff schedule. So you just finished a long, tough regular season, and you're going into what a playoff would be, and you're traveling pretty much 3 weeks in a row, 4 weeks in a row to go win a championship. So just a little too much, I think, on the travel and getting your return on investment. So, but the concept was great. It fell apart 2023 early, right before the season was supposed to start. And there was a group of guys and a group of teams that loved this format so much that we just didn't want to see it die. We'd already had some sponsors invested on our teams. We already had plans. We already had guys on our teams invested. And so we kind of, for lack of a better term, brought it from the ashes and pieced together a season in 2023. I think we had 12 or 14 teams that ended up stringing it together. We had a delayed start, but it was successful. We weren't perfect. We had to figure some things out organizationally and how to function. The outward promotion was kind of a backseat. I kind of wanted to focus on just making our operations good. And then rolling into this year, we went down to 10 teams across 3 regions, but going forward, we already heard there's a bunch of teams down in the Florida, South Georgia area, and they've committed to coming back with their 5 teams next year. We've heard of a couple other teams coming in from the Midwest and the Northeast. So hopefully we'll expand even more, have another region next year, and continue to grow this thing. But it's, slow but steady. That's kind of what we want to kind of achieve before it gets too big.
Yeah, whether it's
that was a lot.
Well, I mean, whether it's the economy, business, or teams, there's this idea of not having demand and the quantity to make it rare, to make it scarce, to make it actually a privilege to be on there. Do you have any thoughts about the growing pains of getting just too big to where it's like, okay, well, if you see this in travel baseball, well, if every kid can be on a travel team, it's watered down, the product. So do you have an idea of a cap in the next 5-10 years?
I think for me personally, I think that 20 team in the next 5 years is solid, because I think you got to curtail that excitement. Of course, we want to expand. Like, we haven't had a team west of the Mississippi. That's the same challenge you see in the bass boat world. The population is scattered, the travel is insane, and it's just tough. So I think that 20 team threshold is solid. I mean, you can have up to 10 guys on your team. And divvying that up, like, we see guys like, on my team, this year we had 7 events. I think 2 or 3 of us fished 5 of those 7. A couple guys could only fish 1 or 2. Some didn't fish at all. So you have to incorporate that, thinking about just how many people it actually impacts. But I think to the real point of how to maintain and stay not too big for your britches is getting to a point you're comfortable with and staying there and staying solid and improving the product so that sponsors can see it. That's the biggest challenge we've had when you're competing with Hobie BOS, when you're competing with Bassmaster, you're competing with KBF, you're competing with some of these, well-known regional trails. It's tight, and with economy down, we've seen it. It's tight to get some of those high-level, quote, league sponsors because we are kind of a smaller fish in a bigger sea that's really not that big, but everybody knows the household names, and we're trying to grow. So I think once you break in there, and I'm talking about like the Yak Attacks, the One Objectives, the Catch Boards, the all those kayak specific brands. It's a competition to get their focus and to get their dollars, because it is tight.
How do you come up with your schedule?
So that's interesting. One of the things that we changed from the original days of the KFL into the Kayak Bass Team Series was we operate at a regional level. So we try to keep that to 3 to 4 teams per region. And then there's a regional representative. So each team has a captain or owner. They do their buy-ins, and then we coordinate with the region how we want to do it. There's freedom there. I'll speak to another region first and then how we did in our region. I'll take the west or southwest region. So you're talking Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, that kind of neck of the woods. They chose to fish some like, quote, bucket list lakes, mostly throughout their schedule. A lot of travel. They fished Caddo their regular season. They fished Possum Kingdom. They fished, I'm going to miss some of them, but some of the like Gunnersville, those type of lakes that you hear, and they just, that's what they chose to do. In the East, because we have the freedom. So we've got ourselves in the Central North Carolina, and there's 2 Tidewater based teams. And so we had 7 regular season events. And I said, let's just randomly pick, who gets first, second, third choice. We'll repeat that in the middle. We'll do a mutual lake. So each team got to pick 2 quote home lakes. And for us, that was Randleman Reservoir, just south of Greensboro, and Shearon Harris Reservoir. And then our mutual lake was Roanoke Rapids, which I care not to speak of ever again because I wasn't there, but we that was our big hiccup this year for our team.
What was the issue?
I think so the cool thing about Roanoke Rapids is we'd kind of all heard of it, and we have such camaraderie and openness with the guys on the Virginia teams. We all get along really well. There's a competitive nature, obviously, but we're level-headed on making smart decisions that are in the best interest of everyone. So we had heard about it. We knew that giant bags come out of there, especially in the boat world. Hadn't heard any kayak tournaments that had ever been held up there for whatever reason. I mean, Gaston gets on the circuit sometimes. But so we had one guy that fished it 25 years ago for striper when they do the dam release. But other than that, so we went in, no one knew anything about it other than it's current driven based on dam release, and there's a ton of grass. And I think, just tough conditions, as I recall, let's say it was late July we fished there. And just tough conditions. And, one of our guys caught a 21 incher right out of the gate. But after that, like there wasn't really the big fish just weren't chewing. I mean, a lot of like 18s, 17s, I think. But the team that won, it was just a specific area. I think everybody eventually clued in on the grass, but our guys caught tons of fish, just not the right size.
So it was more of a fishing issue versus politics?
For sure. Yeah. I would say so. Yeah.
That's the thing that's interesting is it takes guts to expand to these different lakes. I mean, North Carolina has a shit ton of lakes that a lot of people outside North Carolina haven't heard of because the big tours don't go there. And, you would think Bugs Island was the only lake in Virginia because it's got enough hotels or whatever. I mean, the fishing there a lot of times is shit, but
That's terrible. I hate that place.
Yeah. I mean, and I've gone on record on the show, like once it fishes better, I'll sing it praises, but like Gaston's had its ups and downs, but I guess it's a boat ramp or facility issue there, but I don't know. Like we have to figure out a way to find out different bodies of water to explore. So we just take the pressure off, but the fishing can be better in some of these places too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and Carl, think about it from a kayak perspective. We fished it last year in the team tournament, and imagine being out there. Granted, we can get into some back areas and that's kind of what some of the teams ended up doing. But you're out on an ocean of not quality fish. It's not fun to be out there, and it's stories old time. I had a non-team tournament 4 years ago in the fall. Did really great first time on the lake. And caught some decent largemouth in Eastland Creek. And so my plan for the next year for the tournament, is Battle on the Border, which is a regional kind of kayak tournament. It's always on Carbugs. Anyways, went back to Eastland after kind of practicing around some other areas and didn't find much. So I was like, well, I'll go back to Eastland. So found fish loaded up. They were all 11-inch spotted bass and never saw a largemouth the entire day. And I think I was the only one to submit spotted bass that year. I think it was 2021, maybe. That's, I could think from our perspective, is when they first started getting thick. But yeah, Carbugs, not a kayak friendly lake in my opinion.
I think something that I've seen, at least with kayak fishing, is they have a niche that at the beginning of kayak fishing, there was a niche that they could completely have to themselves because bass boats couldn't go there. Classic example is the Susquehanna River about 20 years ago, maybe it was 30, they outlawed basically weigh-in tournaments. So it really just disappeared, I think, from the zeitgeist of bass fishing because you couldn't have boat tournaments there. You couldn't weigh them in. And then kayak came along and all of a sudden people were like, oh shit, the Susquehanna River's got good smallmouth in it. And it was a place that they could go that no one else could go. what I'm seeing a lot now is like now big kayaks like, oh, let's go to Kentucky. Let's go to Kentucky Reservoir. Let's go to, let's go to these big places that bass boats go. And to me, it's like what makes kayak fishing cool is when you go to these places that bass boats can't go and you can catch the shit out of them. Shenandoah River, Upper Potomac. I mean, of course, the smallmouth places, but there are also some sneaky lakes too. Do you like, if you wanted to go to a new lake, do you kind of look at just kind of the catch rates? Is there a voting process if you ever wanted to change it up? Like, how would that work?
As far as for like a team event,
Yeah.
how would you choose that? Yeah, I mean, I think
Or size based?
Yeah, size is a big thing. And you could, I mean, again, you could have both spectrums. There's so many great municipal lakes, and I've kind of talked about that, like for our team championship. We've done the big lake. Obviously, we did Caddo, and then we did last year was Gunnersville. But I'm like, guys, there's got to be these so many quality municipal lakes. I mean, at most we're putting 12, 18 guys for a championship out there. Let's explore and do something fun, something different. But to your point, I've seen it both ways kind of transcend. Like, I mean, I think you're right out of the gate. Like the whole notion was, oh, the kayakers can get into the sneaky stuff. And that's 100% true. But there are tournaments now where, especially with our, the quality of size of the boats that they are now, the kayaks, the ability to have spot lock, the ability to get out of harm's way quickly with motorization. I mean, we're out there in the thick of things sometimes. I mean, you see it, obviously Gunnersville's the prime example. I mean, guys are fishing the ledges with the masses on the community holes. But for us, I mean, how we choose, I mean, again, we have such an open relationship with our guys in Virginia. I mean, they've brought, like, they just want to bring diversity. It's like part of what we know is going to be enjoyable and what is going to probably give them somewhat of an advantage. I'll throw it like the tidal rivers. Yes, we have in North Carolina, but in central North Carolina, we don't fish them much. But those guys, Rappahannock, Chick are the two big ones. So they're like, hey, you're going to come up. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be amazing. We we as a home team, we're going to have the edge a little bit. The Suffolk Lakes are great. We fished a couple of those. It was a great experience. We had a hell of a day for the Lunkers, but we went to Sandy River outside of Farmville this past June. And you got to keep in mind, like, if there's a lot of difference between a solo tournament and a team tournament, because a solo tournament, I can go to Sandy for 2 days in practice and completely miss. But if I got 3 other guys with me and we're going to different parts of the water, we're going to find them. We're going to figure them out. And Sandy to me is almost too small when you have 4 guys over 2 days breaking down water. And pretty obvious that time of year, the pattern. So we absolutely went and wrecked them. It was a lot of, we had, for 10 fish, we were a quarter inch shy of 200 inches. So a 20-inch average across 4 guys. That place is incredible. I can't wait to get back. And I'm embarrassed I haven't been there since this year. And want to go fish Priory, obviously, too. But I do. So, I mean, there's not really a good answer I can have on how we choose a lake. I think, it's just guys kind of have a sense now that they've experienced the bigger lakes, the smaller lakes, municipal lakes, the rivers, like kind of what works. And you see that locally on the trails too. I mean, if you look at the schedules for our trails, it's probably a 50-50 mix between small municipal lakes and then the big lakes in North Carolina being, I guess, Norman, Falls, Jordan, and Harris are the big 4, I'd say.
Which is interesting because a fun debate that I have on the show is like, what size do you have to have? I know people that are spoiled on the Potomac that's, 200,000 acres. And they're like, well, if it's 10,000 acre lake, that's too tiny to have a tournament. But if you're in Ohio, that's a pond that's 4,000, you have a BFL. South Holston, I think it has a BFL every single year, and that's 7,000 acres. So I guess like with so many, I have a map up now looking at some of these North Carolina lakes. They're not big as Norman, but 7,000 acres, 5,000 acres. Is 5,000, do you feel too small for one of your events, or?
No, 5,000 is like right in the sweet spot.
Okay.
I mean, I'd have to go back and look. I mean, for us, if you're looking to like a Lake McIntosh, that's 5 minutes from my house. That is the perfect size for a kayak tournament. It's not a national tournament. You can comfortably get 80 people on that lake in kayaks. There's 2 ramps. That's another big part with kayaks is how many ramps are there, because I think there's 2 lakes. There's several, but like Heiko and Mayo come to mind, where the good sized reservoirs. Mayo's been on the circuit for quite some time. Heiko's only been fished twice in a local trail. And I think a lot is because it has the single ramp. Because for kayakers, that's a challenge, especially before motorization became a thing. But something to look at.
Do all your lakes get, I brought this up a couple of times, but like Virginia, we're starved for lakes. We have a lot of rivers, but we're starved for lakes. If anyone glance right now at a map of North Carolina, you guys got a shit ton of lakes. You just do. And so I guess from a tournament organizer, it's got to be nice to where you could, in theory, sprinkle into the lakes that aren't as pressured, or do all the lakes get pressured equally?
No, there's definitely some that don't. Like McIntosh again. So the middle of the lake, there are boat tournaments fairly often. There are a lot of John boat tournaments, but there's a section of the lake that's there's actually two sections of McIntosh that are non-motorized. So we really have, half of the lake to ourselves as far as kayaks and canoes go.
Oh, wow.
That's a big part of it. But there's so many, like, I'll use like the Catawba chain, for instance, the Adkin chain. So you got High Rock. Everybody knows High Rock. Gets tons of pressure. But then just below it, you got Tuckertown, hardly any pressure because of the size. You got Baden, Tillery, a little less. And I think what I've seen on the local trails is they try to do one of two things. The one they'll do, so Queen City out of Charlotte every year does the Adkin YOLO. You can choose any of those 4 lakes.
That's smart
to fish.
That's cool.
And and again, they get a lot more numbers. They're on a high end, they'll get over 100 people in their tournaments. End of the year, it's maybe 80. But 1, they can spread them out. 2, they'll rotate. So like one club will do Tillery 1 year, and then next year they'll switch and do Baden. Each trail has their regulars. Like it just depends. But I think for one, and I don't know what I don't know because I didn't grow up in the bass boat world, but like I actually like Shearon Harris a lot. It doesn't fish anything like it used to, like guys used to say when the vegetation was in. I love fishing it. I hate fishing it, but I also love fishing it because I know the caliber of fish that are in there. Jordan, I hate it. Falls, hate it. They're not kayak friendly lakes. So I obviously cater to more of the municipal lakes. Just personal preference. And I think I would say probably kayak world, most guys would say that, because there obviously is less pressure on those municipal lakes than now. There are some that, especially pre-spawn around here, get absolutely hammered. So they're not fun that time of year, but rest of the year you have a good time.
Before we switch to the national championship, I got the Tourney X thing up here. We could talk about that. Do all the lakes fish the same? I mean, is that something where it's like, okay, they're all the same, so picking the schedule's easy, or it's like, I want to throw in some unique curveballs during the season?
They don't fish the same at all. Even like here regionally within 30 minutes, every lake fishes differently. Some of them get blown out a lot easier than others. Some of them, they set up really well offshore and you can get huge pods, and some of them they don't set up at all. And you got to kind of go, fish for isolated single fish. They're all different. I think that's the beauty. I'm talking about North Carolina in general. I always tell guys that, when we see the other regions, like the beauty of our neck of the woods is you have everything from tidal, brackish water to lakes with tons of docks, lakes with 0 docks, lakes with vegetation, lakes void of vegetation, clear water when you get up in the Western North Carolina. So much diversity that I honestly could say, like, if I'm a tournament director, I could sit there and say, okay, I got to pick 8 lakes and not even think about the diversity. And when I sit and look at them, like, they're all diverse.
That's cool. That's really cool.
One thing it is, it's just the fisheries down here are just amazing. For the most part, they're managed very well. Some of them have issues with a ton of undersized fish, but I've not been on a lake that's, just a grind. The most I could, carbugs would be the most that I can think of, is like a grinder. Now obviously you have dog days of summer tournaments that can be a grinder, but when you look at the whole season in general, there's not a lake around here that's just absolutely tough, in my opinion.
With that kind of culture you guys grow up in, where it's not a lot of vegetation, pressured fish offshore, and then you go to the national championship. I mean, kind of set the stage for this bad boy, where you went for people that haven't heard of it before.
A whole new world, man. So we fished Caddo Lake, and it's a natural lake on the border of Louisiana and Texas. Going into it, two of our guys had fished it before a handful of times. KBF had done their national championship there a few times back, 2019 and 2021. So we had two guys that kind of knew what to expect and kind of gave us the rundown. But it's the largest natural lake in Texas. I guess it's 50-50 Texas, Louisiana. Man-made lake, or no, sorry, a natural lake. Very much natural. And there's two theories of that. One was a flood that created a natural log jam, and the other was a massive earthquake that kind of just naturally, uplifted a dam. Anyways, it's the world's largest cypress forest. And there's places, if you look, if you cruise around, especially on like the northwest side, like it looks like it's forest, but when you zoom in, it's water all underneath there. I will say in the river section on the west side, you saw some areas that were maybe 15 feet deep, but when you get out anywhere near the lake, when I say 3.5 foot deep is it, 3.5 foot deep is it. It's just an insane fishery. Cypress trees for days, huge lily pads, areas with a lot of hydrilla and milfoil, a lot of places with dollar pads, Spanish moss. I mean, there's all this natural beauty. And then the wild thing is on the north side, you have Oil City. So it's like, if you look back from like the 20s and 30s, there were like oil rigs set up every 20 yards, and there's still oil rigs out in the lake operating to this day. It's the wildest thing. I mean,
that's so cool.
It's insane. It's really eerie, especially when you have electrical wires just dangling down into the water, and they've probably been doing that for hundreds of years. But the fishery is just awesome. So we went into it knowing it was not going to be anything like we fished before. I mean, some of us have fished Santee Cooper with the cypress, obviously Chick River, Chick Lake, but nothing like this vast. And this just hardly any channels. You had some boat lanes, but just a big flat mess of trees and vegetation. And how do you break that down? And we took it seriously. I mean, we were there for a whole week. We rolled in, some of us rolled in the Saturday before. So back with the regular season, we fished 4 anglers for the best 10 fish. What we decided for the national championship is we wanted for the teams that qualified to let the guys enjoy it as much as they could. So we expanded to allowing 6 guys on the water. We expanded it to 2 days, and we expanded it to 20 fish cumulative over 2 days. And, so we went to town, just, different parts of the lake, try this, try that. And I mean, we found fish every single day. Some days were tougher than others. Some days it was, I would say for the most part, the vast majority of the lake, you could easily catch 20 bass a day that were 14 to 16 inches, and you might get one kicker that was 19. So, I mean, it was fun. We were catching a ton of fish. It was a pretty repeatable pattern. But then as the week went on, it's like, okay, one of our guys, and we'll get into it, Wyatt, I'd seen him Monday afternoon. I got on the water for the first time. Actually, I was doing some work calls, and bass started blowing up. I said, well, I don't mind catching schoolers because they're unpredictable. Let's just have fun. Caught 30 probably in an hour and a half, just blowing up top waters out of the water. I mean, it's like I was catching snook or redfish. It was insane. Of course, the one day I didn't have my GoPro running. That's it always. I mean, I've never seen bass this aggressive where one popped, walking bait, probably 3 feet out of the water. It would foul up and be like torpedoing under the water. They're still hitting it. It'd be dead still. There'd be 2 trying to hit it. Anyways, so I caught one good one out of it. And then I ran to my buddy Wyatt, and he was like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. I caught one here, caught one there. I was like, well, I want you to see this spot. I was like, I think they're just schoolers coming through, but I was like, let's just see. He's a master, a wizard at side scan. He's a wizard at attention to detail. I said, just come over here for like 5 minutes. I want to see what you see. And first couple throws with a spinnerbait, he hooks up the small ones. He's like, oh yeah, they're stacked up in here. They're not just schooling. And on one of the casts he'd pulled in, like, and I, to this day, I don't think it was hydrilla. I don't even think it was milfoil, something very similar. And he was like, I've been out here for 2 days. This is like the first I've seen this type of vegetation. And I'm like, well, maybe that's a clue. Long story short, he took off. I got back to the house, and like 4 hours later, it's dark, and I'm like starting to get worried about him. And he finally rolls up, and I'm like, I was getting worried about you. He's like, well, when I left you at 3:00, I was headed back to the ramp, but the fish had other ideas. And I was like, oh yeah, you found him? And he just gave me this look. He's like, oh yeah. And he's like, everything was 18 inches or bigger. He's like, I caught 6, I shook off a bunch. And so he had his area. Same pattern we had been running the whole lake. Just he found a wad of giants. And so he managed them throughout the week. That was on Monday. So it's tough. Like, and again, why it's insane. He spent a whole day, literally looks like a checkerboard, where he scanned it himself, got his own sonar built, his own bathymetry built, checked him another day. He's like, you know what? I'm just going to look for something else for all the rest of us. Dude showed me he put in 18 miles in his kayak, like day 3. So anyways, I know I'm rambling, but we all caught fish. We started to see some bigger fish. And then what the aha moment was, two different things. With Wyatt's fish, they had gotten pressured. One was very obvious. We were worried about it. One was a little hidden. They were a couple hundred yards apart. And then one day he'd seen some boats roll in. And he went back 2 days before our tournament started. And he's like, yeah, they kind of scattered. There's some there, but it's not like it was. They got beat up. And got a little worried. We had a weather change come in. It'd been hot, very, very windy all early in the week. And then Thursday, so the day before the tournament, big weather change come in. Just like here, they hadn't had rain forever. So we had a pretty significant squall line come through in the morning. And so we all only got like 3 or 4 hours on the water Thursday, like, final preparations before we start the tournament Friday. And, for him, he kind of figured out, and he's going to have to tell that story one day, because there's going to be a national trail that comes, and there's something very specific he figured out that was just insane and speaks to his caliber of how good of an angler he is, and his record speaks for it. For us, so Bassmaster was at Caddo and Bistineau 2 weeks before we were. And they visit Caddo and Bistineau quite often. It's always the premise that Caddo's the better spring fishery and Bistineau shows out in the fall. Bistineau, they drop like 6 or 7 feet. It's a wild, I mean, same kind of setup, cypress for days, but they drop the water like 6 or 7 feet, and it really, puts those fish in barrels, so to speak. Not taking away anything from the guys. Like, I mean, there's certain hot areas you got to find certain patterns. But what we found out on Caddo was really only 2 of the guys. So Jody Queen and Abby Amandanza were 2 of the guys that cut a check, and both had over 100-inch days on Caddo. And trustworthy guys, throwing the bluegill chatterbait. It's out there for public consumption. We threw the bluegill chatterbait all week. Hardly a bite. I didn't have a single bite on it. Bluegill pattern, a little bit on spinnerbait, but my aha moment was when the schoolers were going. I actually fired that bluegill chatterbait, and on back-to-back cast, I had 2 chase it to the boat and didn't commit.
Interesting.
And I was like, you know what? They've seen, because I know, I mean, let's just say there's probably 40 guys, 50 guys on Caddo. They saw 100 bluegill chatterbaits probably. And then also one of the other patterns was bluegill beds, where a lot of the smaller fish were, and you could tell they were pressure because you could throw a drop shot in and catch 2 or 3 and then nothing. You could throw a rattle trap in, rip it, 2 or 3, nothing. Once again, never really got bit on the chatterbait. So the aha moment, one of the areas we did well in was, let me go to something more subtle, not the big jackhammer, real aggressive chatterbait. Let me go to a mini max, something a little more subtle, smaller. And I took a bluegill and I took a shad. I was like, you know what? A mile away, they were chasing shad 4 days ago. Let me tie this on. And first cast, boom. Third cast, boom. Fifth cast, boom. Team format. My buddy's right next to me. I'm like, hey, mini max, tie it on. And so he tied it on. Well, he went 10 minutes without a bite. And then he's finally like, oh my gosh, big one. He's like, yeah, I had the bluegill one on for the first 10 minutes. Put a shad color on. First cast, boom. So wrapping it up, like we had caught good fish all week. The 18s and above were kind of hard to come by. And so that day after the storms, my buddy Wyatt caught a 22. My buddy Dontrell lost a giant on a frog that, he was like, it was 7 or 8 pounds. My buddy Rick with the chatterbait lost one. He's like 7 or 8 pounds. I saw the mouth. So the big fish showed up. I don't know if it was the weather change. I don't know if it was our change in shad pattern, combination of both. But up until that point, we'd only had like 3 fish as a team over 20 inches in practice. And no giant ones. There was just a ton of 18s. And Wyatt was like, I'm on 18s. Okay, so the plan is let's target a limit of 18s. Let's target, 360 to 380 inches as a team for 20 fish. And if we get kickers, then we're in good shape. And that was kind of the plan. But I challenged the guys. I said, if what we saw with this weather change and what this small, lure change was, and if Wyatt's on what he thinks he's on, I said, guys, you think 400 inches for 20 fish is out of the realm? That's just insane. Like, and it was kind of a challenge looking back at Sandy River because we were so like, man, we were a quarter inch short of having a 20 inch fish average. I don't think it's ever been done for a team tournament. And so like, I just challenged them, and I got like, nope, not going to happen. Nope. We hadn't seen the 20s. I said, okay. And shocking what happened. We had some bigs early on in the morning on Friday. But by the afternoon, Wyatt got rolling. Other guys were adding big ones, and we ended day one with 402 and a quarter inches.
That's insane.
It's just, it was, there's a video out there, kind of an emotional release. We got back to the house. As exciting as it was to be in that position, like I had an emotional moment, like, cause this team thing, like it's so much more than just, I don't know if you can hear those dings. I'm trying to get rid of that.
Oh, you're good. No, I don't hear anything.
Okay, good. Sorry, I have to cut that out. It's a tough spot to be in when you have a day like that and it's a 2-day tournament. It's not like, most of the team tournaments or all the bass tournaments, obviously, you have your day 1 total, your day 2 total. This was just 20 over the 2 days. So it's like, there's no way that's going to get topped. There's no way. Like, we just won. I had my emotional release out in the water, waiting for my buddy to get back to the ramp. Because there's so much effort that goes into team stuff. It's not just show up and fish. I mean, we're managing a team. We're doing the work to get Airbnbs. We're trying to put a roster together. We're trying to make the right decisions for who's going to go where, when, how, just all those things that go into it. And, last year we were so close. The privateers out of Norfolk, we ended up tying them in the regular season, and they won a tie break the whole course of the whole year. The tie break is total inches for all your events. And they beat us by 11 and a quarter inches. So less than a minimum size bass. So we were so close last year, and to make it this year, like, we really had it like dead set. We're going to do this. So yeah, day one happened. I mean, everybody we actually got together. All the 3 teams got together and had some burgers and hot dogs. And like, it's tough because like you can't talk about it, but everybody's look is just like, why are we even going to show up tomorrow? Because it was insane. I mean, I think second place day 1 was like 340, 350. So like, I mean, they had to make up. I mean, it was something like 30 or 40 inches they had to make up, and we had room to call as well. And we're like, well, I'll challenge you guys again. Let's go 20 for 20. Let's try to have 20 bass of 20 inches or better. And we got very close. But we added, I think we went into day 2 with 18 and a quarter as our smallest bass. And I think we called up another 8 plus inches. So day 2 was definitely tougher. I don't know if it was just pressure from all of us, or, we tried to expand, but yeah, I mean, hats off to the other teams. The northern team, Motor City Ambassadors, like, I mean, it was foreign enough for us. Those guys are used to like St. Clair and smallmouth and, Clearwater. So I know they were just on a whole different world, trying to explore that lake as well. But at the end of the day, like, just to shout out, like, Wyatt Hammond had a absolute day. I mean, I want to say, like, day one, he had like 108 inches as his best 5, and went back to the same spot and had like 103.5 or something for day 2.
That's insane.
Insane. He would have won the tournament by himself. We could have stayed home, and hindsight. But the other cool thing that I think is really cool about the team, I was like, man, I just want to do the math. And we were so close. Like, if Wyatt had not submitted a single fish, we would have gotten close to still winning. He would only had to submitted 2 19.25, which were his 2 smallest fish, and we still would have won. So it's just a testament. Like, we did. I mean, to me, we attacked that lake as a team. We planned, we practiced. I mean, all that stuff. Really took it seriously, and the result would have been the same. But Wyatt absolutely smashed him. I hope he gets to share it someday.
When you're talking about the chatterbait bite, I mean, it's always fascinating to me. I always think, and I guess it's because of wood, right? Like, the chatterbait played because routinely. Yeah, interesting. Why the chatterbait, I guess?
Well, so it's kind of weird because I mean, we got some big bites on chatterbait. It definitely played. It wasn't like the winning pattern, I'd say. I mean, we had a lot of frog mixed in.
Okay.
A lot of like Texas rig stuff mixed in, but the chatterbait bite, it is totally different. I've not seen this before. So the big thing about Caddo we noticed, I mean, just like if you're talking, I'll relate to Chick River or Chick Lake. Not all cypress trees are the same. It's all about the depth. But that's even harder on Caddo because it's so much more uniform on the depth. Is there wind blowing in on it? Are they isolated? Is there a group of them? Is there a pattern of how they're grouped? All these things, like, I'm trying to figure out. I figured out one little thing, but the biggest difference with Caddo is on these eastern cypress, the knees go out for days, like huge knees.
Interesting.
Caddo does not have that. They're very much, you have the tree and it just goes, it widens at the base, but very little networks of the knees, which I thought was very weird. But obviously those trees get pressured. And I think what we noticed with the bite on the chatterbait was you couldn't throw it at the tree. You had to throw it a solid 10 to 15 yards past the tree. You're ripping it, hopping it a little bit past the tree. You're still dealing with a little bit of hydrilla and other vegetation here and there. The fish were positioned on the stumps, 100%. But it was not like it was a reaction bite when the chatterbait hit the stump. You had to rip it back towards you, and they would hit it about 5 to 8 feet past the tree towards you, which was very interesting and very frustrating because you have to set the hook with the fish moving at you almost 90% of the time. And it was just, we had a lot of I think we missed a lot of fish because of it. It's so hard when you're fishing like that, and you almost have to pause and like kind of reverse that hook in a way. We kind of figured it out eventually, but man, it was a weird bite for sure. But 100% shad. Even though fish were holding around bluegill beds in some areas, even this late in the season, they were keyed on the shad, and that was the difference for our chatterbait bite.
Yeah, and if I got to fish down there, I would not have had shad on my bingo card as one of the primary forages for a place like that. Just looking at it, you'd think shiner or bluegill specifically.
Yeah, well, so day 2, I mean, obviously we're going for bigs at this point, and I was throwing a big glide bait all day because we'd seen some videos recently. I never saw them in person, but there were some big gizzards being chased around there too. Most of what I was seeing was a threadfin or something smaller, but I had actually there's a big fish on day 1. I had a real mini. I actually bought it in Bristol on our way out. It's kind of a mini glide bait. It's probably like a 4-inch, 4.5. And it came up and nosed it pretty hard. And the way it hit, I was like, "That's a resident fish. I'm gonna get him tomorrow." So I tried the big glide later. Nothing. Caught that fish on the shad chatterbait. It was 19.5 on day 2. But yeah, it was weird. Like, I mean, obviously I think, some of the frog bites, I think I don't know how those fish think. I mean, there's a different beast of fish that will attack a frog. To me, in my mind, it was the bluegill bite because you hear them popping a little bit midday. But yeah, I mean, it was for me, the area I was in was primarily a shad bite.
So coming back from there, where is your head at as a team going into 2025?
So, just keep it rolling. Our team is so sound and solid. We had a couple new guys come on this year that hadn't experienced it before, and they were like, it's hard to explain because, like, I think the kayak fishing, the sport in general, I'm sure bass boat guys can relate to. It's like it fills that niche of guys that grew up playing team sports of like, baseball, whatever, football, basketball. And I think when the solo tournaments got popular, like that was their competitive nature, that was their release. And then they've all attested when they see the team thing, it's just different. Like, we're not making the most money, not making as much money as you could on a solo trail. But we're not in it for the money. We're in it for the experience. We're in it for the team, doing it for the team, relying on other guys. You can have a down day. Guys can build you up, vice versa. The travel component, I mean, we always share a house, travel together, all that kind of thing. So it hits different. So obviously, I mean, for us, we have our two Virginia teams that, they should, I have no reason to believe they won't be around next year. Each year we have to kind of figure that out. We are going to slowly increase our buy-ins for next year and we're going to change to give a little bit more money to the payouts. I'd love to expand. It's hard, right? Because we still want to keep it regional based to keep that travel down. So like we're looking at another North Carolina team, a Virginia team, even a Maryland team. If guys are interested, it's just a great concept. The big change, the other thing we're going to be doing next year, and we just, we're trying to feel out what works for us. 2 years ago, we fished 6 events. This past year, we fished 7. We're actually thinking about taking it down to 5 next year. And for 2 reasons. We're going to increase the buy-in. So this year, I think it was $1,400 or $1,500 for a team for the whole year. We had a little bit of payout for whoever won first place for their weekly events would get like $300. So it's, it's not a lot, but it helps go to the team pot for gas and, Airbnbs and stuff like that. I mean, we know we're not making money individually. We're going to increase that to $2,500 is what the ballpark figure is right now. And then we're going to try to pay out first and second on the weekly events. That way, it's just more incentive to show up. You're not just showing up, and if you lose, you don't get anything out of it. We do accrue points based on your place of finish, and that's how we choose our regional winners. But it's just, something we want to limit, because, if you rode out 2 events, 5 doesn't sound like a lot, but 7 was a lot, honestly. If you take it down to 5, you're really cutting out probably, $3,000 in expenses, I would think, between Airbnbs and if you're doing gas and food and stuff for 4 guys 2 times, it's probably about what it is. So, and part of that is just our world as we're growing. Like our team, obviously we're fully sponsored for our travel, which was awesome. Huge blessing for some of the companies that we have. But a lot of teams are self-funded. Either that's their intention, they haven't quite figured out how to get the sponsors. So we have to consider both realms. I mean, we'd love obviously to have, one day $5,000 buy-in, a $10,000 buy-in or more. But we have to get all the teams on the same level of, understanding that the sponsors and having that support behind you is really key to being able to compete at the level we want to get it to.
Do you think there's going to be consolidation when you have KBF, the Team Trail, Hobie, Bassmaster? I mean, we talk about, or people in the industry talk about the issues with just having, the BPT and Bassmaster. Well, kayaking, it's insane how much there is.
You've already started to see it. I mean, there's been consolidation of local trails having combination events with the national trails, like Queen City out of Charlotte. They've done that, both a combo event with Hobie BOS and then a combo event, their Native No Limit series that has had some mixed success, I think. And I don't, I can't speak to it directly, but there's talk now, like how successful, it's crazy to think like the Hobie BOS tournament champion just took home $25,000. They're still figuring out what next year is going to look like. You look at Bassmaster. I mean, really wasn't a well-ran organization 3-4 years ago, and all of a sudden their numbers are their numbers are through the roof. So their numbers are up. Hobie BOS is down. KBF is hanging on by a thread for obvious reasons I won't go into. I think there's still, I think there's hope and a chance that they can, fix that issue. But yeah, I mean, there has to be some kind of consolidation. The team concept was really cool. Still is. I know there's other spinoffs of team. Like there's been spinoffs of like 2-man team style events. But one day how you incorporate it, I think it will happen.
It has to happen. And it is interesting because, I mean, I would say like the elder statesman in the kayak world is Hobie, with breaking through with everything they did. And their payouts are better than Bass. They are. And I guess that's going to be the interesting thing. Personally, from an outsider specifically in the kayak world, if Hobie keeps the structure they have when it comes to payouts and stuff, they are the person to beat. If they try to take a couple of steps back and get on the same level as Bass, I don't know what's going to happen there. And KBF, it does seem like from the people I've talked about, they are the third man at the table right now. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It is so interesting to me when you look at the comparisons, I guess, of FLW and Bass, and then you have Hobie and Bass, but then you got the NPFL, which would be, I guess, the KBF organization. But it's so scattered, and everyone keeps back. I keep coming back to this on my show. It's like regional stuff, even whether it's boats or kayaks. Why do you want to travel if you can make a lot of money in your backyard? Like it doesn't make sense. And I know that hurt Hobie and Bass this year, where if you're in Virginia, why do you want to travel to Florida and Texas? Like if you can do it, great. But if there are regional circuits that come up to where you can make just as much money or a reasonable amount of money, if you're a family man or if you don't want to spend the gas, like that's something that I think is going to become more of a thing going into the future.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It's definitely tough. I mean, as much as I want to do the national trails, I know I can't. The team between the local stuff and this team series, like it's more than enough to keep me busy. Mm-hmm. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to get rich doing it. I love it. It's my passion. I love, just me personally, the team concept and having somewhat of a leadership role in that. It itches that tick for me. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Like it's. We hear it all the time too. Like the guys on the West Coast are really screwed because, for obvious reasons, they can't. I mean, feasibly, how can you do this? And I know there's always the idea that you could fish an event and choose your home water. I don't like that. Honey holes, it's not. I hate multi-lake events. I'll just say that. In our kayak world, we have it. It's cool that you get the option, but I just hate it's not a true test of who the best angler, in my opinion, that given day is, because for whatever reason, that one lake could shut off. Even though you've been nailing them in practice and somebody just goes out and lands on them. That's just personal preference. But I mean, there's a very small sample size of people who love the sport that could actually do that and travel like they do. You're eliminating a lot of people. And they, I don't know, maybe one day they do get to regional, the kayak world gets to a regional thing. I mean, right now I think they're thriving on just the local trails to scratch that itch. But it'd be cool to see if Hobie or Bass considers that, where kind of like with the opens where you have the little groupings now. I'm sure they considered it. I'm surprised it hasn't happened just yet.
And maybe it'll be the team series that does it. I know like Mid-Atlantic Kayak up in Susquehanna, they got banging payouts. MVKBA's payouts are getting better, and they're local-ish clubs. But and Texas has this too. Like you don't actually have to go on a massive tour if you live in Texas. You can literally stay in the state and make a living fishing. And
yeah.
I think that's what will happen here in the future. Virginia, North Carolina, the local organizations, the payouts will get to the point where it doesn't make sense to leave unless you want to for fun. And that I think is kind of important to see, because like when you look at what's going on with Bass with the no entry fees and that whole debacle, and that the money's not there, or the economy right now is not there to where you can make a living doing it. But if you have these local organizations that are like, hey, there's a niche here we can fill, we'll come here in your backyard. I think that could happen. And it is happening.
Yeah, for sure. 100% agree. I think the team thing, like I said, could be the catalyst for that.
Yeah.
it's worked. It's we're not perfect, but we've proven that the concept works. Doesn't break the bank. We just got to get to where, get the payouts. And to your point of payouts, it's already happening here in North Carolina, especially. Look at the big three are Central Carolina, Carolina Kayak, and Queen City. Queen City by far and away has the most sponsor support. They have the biggest numbers. They're around the biggest population base, Charlotte area. You can make a pretty good living. I say make a good living. You could do well. We got a guy here that, you got the local sticks. Will Lambert's a guy. He won't state this, but he probably has brought home close to 15 grand a year the last couple of years, just fishing within an hour of his house. I know like CKA, between winning an event and a big bass is probably 500 usually. Winning events, around that, 1,000 to 1,400 based on, the buy-ins. Central Carolina's a little lower than that, but still, if you want to take it easy and have an enjoyable Saturday, you might come home with $800 for winning first place. It's not a bad little gig. Just a matter of what you want to put into it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is and when we talk about these numbers, it's also the expense stuff. So that's why I said when you look at what Hobie did with it's only 25,000. It's but they're not spending 15,000 or 5,000 on entry fee in the gas. So
right.
It stretches a lot more. If you did win 10,000 over a year, that's great because you're not spending BFL or Toyota level entry fees to do all that.
Fees. Yeah.
And that's what you don't get. Guys, it's never about how much you win, it's how much you spend, whether it's boating or kayaking. If you win $100, but you spent 300, that don't work math wise.
It don't work. Yep. 100%.
Dave, we covered so much today. Is there anything that we forgot to really touch on?
Well, I do want to highlight, just kind of talking about the North Carolina footprint and blending into Virginia. Maybe there's some opportunity. Just like I mentioned, our 3 big trails around here. There's 2 more on the periphery, so Foothills kayak anglers are on the kind of a little far away from Virginia, but Port City is kind of a cool concept going forward. They just started last year, small numbers, but right intention. They're going to actually incorporate saltwater events into their, and I don't know how they're going to do it. I kind of the rumor is hey, 1 month they'll do bass, and then the next month they'll do whatever species of saltwater's hitting that month and do it that way. They're actually going to be bold and be the first kayak trail that I know of that's going to ban forward facing, which they're not huge, but he wants to start it out of the gate. And I think maybe their lakes, except for one that comes to mind, they don't really cater to it. So it's probably a good natural fit. I do hope, and maybe they'll expand a little farther, north. It's kind of like the Edenton area a little bit, maybe. But yeah, I know, I thought of them because I know MVKBF does the snakehead side pot kind of thing, and I think it's the same thing,
which is fun. I really do enjoy.
It's totally fun.
Yeah, any tournaments, whether it's a boat or a kayak, I love having those little side pots throughout the day.
100%. Yep. Yeah, it makes a lot of fun. So, but no, in Virginia, there's a couple, just kind of cross into more of your geography. So just the regional events we're going to have. I don't know where the first one's going to be. It's the Carolina Classic, which Foothills, Carolina, and Central Carolina have decided to coordinate on. They did Lake Hickory the first year, Falls Lake this past year. Foothills is going to be hosting it, so I'm going to guess it's going to be a Hickory or Lake James.
For people that don't know, what is the foothills of Carolina? What is that? The western portion?
Well, yeah. So I'd say just west of Charlotte, going into the mountains. So the places they normally they still fish a Lake Norman, but they'll fish Lake Hickory, Lake James, W. Kerr Scott, and Wilkesboro is a great little fishery. I think they've gone as far west as maybe Fontana, those far western North Carolina lakes, but that's a stretch even for them geographically to get up there. But that's kind of the just west of Charlotte is kind of the easiest way to say it. So they got that going on. Battle on the Border happens every year. Again, that's going to be on Carbugs. That's usually very late October, early November. So it incorporates several of the North Carolina clubs, and they actually, can't rail them off now, but like 3 or 4 of the Virginia-based clubs came and fished this year. We've had some in the past, but even more so. And if you go back and look at the leaderboard for that, which is on Fishing Chaos, not Tourney X, but there was a lot of names I'd never seen before. Virginia guys, and actually Maryland guy was top 3, I think. So probably some of you're familiar with. So that event is going on. And then the last one, definitely want to hit on this because I think this is I said I hate multi-lake events, but this one's so insane that who knows? And the atmosphere of it is kind of fun. But it's the Kayak Adventure Series. I don't know if you've heard of Drew Gregory and what he's got going on.
No.
So check him out, Kayak Adventure Series. He just started this past year. I didn't get a chance to fish any of them, but he's a river rat at heart, number one. Number two, like he just wants to bring the fun back into kayak fishing and bring, like, for guys that do have the families, bring the fun family atmosphere. So like he'll do, it's kind of a cool concept. He picks these little municipal areas that have an old classic theater in their downtown, and he'll book them to do the award show, and he'll book like bounce houses and a cookout the night before. And they actually do like a low key Friday evening, like a half day starts the tournament, and then all day Saturday. And then they do a big award Saturday. They do, like a breakfast event. They'll get like biologists in, yada, yada, yada. So he's just taking a different spin to it's still good money. It's still awesome trophies and hardware and all that stuff, but just a little bit different spin to make it a little less pressure and a little more family friendly. But he's doing he's got cool names for all these. South Boston Bassathons, May 2nd and 3rd. Hear me out when I say all these bodies of water that are in play. Bugs Island, Mayo Lake, Hyco Lake, Bannister Lake, Briery Lake, Dan River, Stanton and Roanoke River, Bannister River, Hyco River, and many more fishable tributaries. In early May, have fun. If you win, you've earned it. I don't know. That's just a crazy amount of fisheries, and I'm definitely going to make that one. Like I said, you're going to see a lot more than just showing up and fishing a tournament, I think. And I think it's been pretty successful. There is, again, the team component of that too. You can do like a 2-day or 2-man side pot thing for that. So, but it's been successful. He's all over the country doing, and he's hitting places that normally people wouldn't. And so I think it's a really cool concept, and definitely wanted to shout that out because I'm sure it'll draw some interest from the Virginia guys, obviously. Smith Mountain should be on there, but we'll see.
Yeah, that place is interesting just because of the boat ramp access. And the other thing is just, especially for kayaks, it's traffic once you get that pleasure boat traffic and how you deal with that. Virginia, we're blessed because in the summertime, generally speaking, you go to smallmouth rivers or you'll go to motor restricted lakes because we have so many in Virginia. And then you don't have to deal with that because if you go to Lake Anna in July, you might die. I mean, it gets so crazy.
Well, that's the same. Like Hyco was one where it's funny because I know the reason. So Hyco and Mayo are a half hour apart. Mayo gets some pleasure boaters, but Hyco is the closest lake to Raleigh-Durham that has houses and therefore boats and docks on it. So it has the population. And I told guys I think it got fished once, like in February on a Carolina Kayak Anglers Trail. But I was talking to the director of Central Carolina. I was like, you need to consider this, but it needs to happen before Memorial Day or after Labor Day. And the hard part, again, because it's a one ramp deal too, where if we launch, pre-dawn or at dawn, there's obviously pockets and safe places you can get into. And if you're not, aware of the circumstances, you can go and fish your heart out all day and have a great time and not be bothered. But then when you try to come back to the ramp, you can get in some serious trouble if you're not prepared for it. So, and that's why, again, municipal lakes around here, Greensboro, city lakes, there's a ton of those too. We have a lot of options at our disposal to get away from it, like the smallmouth waters. But Smith Mountain, another one, Queen City is doing, they had like their main trail, and then they tried like a western, a southern, and a northern trail. It didn't really pan out this year. So they're going back to just their main trail. But then they're doing 3 satellite events, and one of them is Smith Mountain in September.
That'll be cool.
So be curious to see, because I just didn't work out for me to get up there. I've actually not fished it. I've been there once on vacation, but I've never fished it. But late September next year, circle that one.
That'll be interesting. Yeah, no, I mean, there's so many opportunities out there for anyone to kind of get into it. Again, this is why it's interesting to me to see historically what this does to the fishing industry. Because if you do live in, Charlotte or Northern Virginia, DC, you can't have a 22-foot skeeter parked in your garage. You can have a kayak and you can pimp it out with all the technology, and you can go make money and really dabble your toe into it. I still think this is really the thing that took a big chunk out of co-angling is you can spend less, win more, and you have control to make decisions. And it's such an interesting gateway. I know some friends of mine that they live in the Shenandoah Valley. There's no lakes. They started kayak fishing the Shenandoah. They won a bunch of money. It gave them confidence to expand. And now one of them got a boat and is going to do boat tournaments. But the point is, like, it's that gateway drug now. And if you have a whole set of people that this is all they know, what does that do when they get older to the market, to what we buy, to how we view, like, even catch, measure, release? I know the old guard hates the catch, weigh, release, but it's like, that's because they didn't grow up on it. You will have a bunch of anglers that all they know is catch, photo, release. That's going to change a shit ton when we talk about how the industry views that stuff in 10, 15 years.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, it's everything. And like I said, I don't know what I don't know, but I mean, I've talked to guys like, I mean, it's not a huge number, but almost every event I'll run into someone who's like, oh yeah, I used to fish bass boat tournaments, and now he's like, I'll never go back. Nothing against those guys, nothing against how it operates. He's like, but I think not only the flexibility, the, having everything at your disposal. And again, you can go out with bare bones or you can deck these things out now. But I think what I've heard from guys, obviously in kayak, you can't just run around and bebop, Yeah, you can run a pattern, but it's got to be a very localized pattern. And guys will say, like, it just makes me a better angler that I can sit down and really pick a place apart. I don't have an option. I can't be impatient. I have to sit here and at least, within reason. I mean, granted, we've made some long runs before in tournaments, but obviously nothing like a bass boat.
It's not 250 Mercury. Like, it's just, but you're right though. Cause like, the reptilian part of my brain is like, oh, I got a 225. I got to use the damn thing. Right. Like it's a cop out almost. Like I have this crutch that I can fall back on to give me a false sense of security. Whereas if you're in a kayak, I don't care how big your torpedo is, you can't go from one end of Kerr to the other. Like that's not happening. You got to pick your spot and guts and nuts it, period.
Yep. 100%. Yep.
But Dave, I mean, I really appreciate you coming on and really just highlighting so many of the fisheries in North Carolina. I think it's really unsung, some of these places that if the BFLs don't go there to like High Rock for the 87th time or the BPT, people wouldn't understand all the opportunities, and especially in the kayak world. Is there anything that we can link in the episode description?
Yeah, I mean, I can put some stuff here for if guys want to check out the Kayak Bass Team Series. If they're interested in doing a team thing, I can throw that up there. Any of the local trails have links. I can throw those up there. And again, I mean, even if you don't want to come fish the tournaments, like, do check out the municipal lakes in these areas if you're in a kayak, especially. I mean, most of them will allow bass boats. All of them will allow the John boat world. But there's so many great lakes just within. I'm halfway between Greensboro and Raleigh. If you put a point where I'm at, I mean, within 2 hours, it's insane how many places you can fish and the caliber, the quality, the quantity. I mean, there's places, if you want to go catch 100 fish a day that are 1 to 2 pounds, I can show you. If you want to go try to catch an 8.5 pounder, it's going to be a tough bite, but you can do that too. And it's not the Jordans, the Harrises, the Falls, Fox. It's so many quality municipal lakes that are managed very well. And I've just scratched the surface. I mean, I've been fishing competitively since 2020, and there's still numerous bodies of water within an hour of me that I want to hit. So just pull up a map, look at it, and happy to answer your questions if anybody comes across it. Shoot me a message or whatever. Well,
one more question that really popped into my mind is for MVKBA, we do a battle of 5 lakes in Fredericksburg because the lakes are within 2 minutes of each other. But one reason is Mooney, which is about 600, 700 acres. You could probably catch 35 pounds your best 5. It's insanely good. And Hunting Run, like, the lakes are so good that even though they're smaller, it's like, we got to put this on the schedule to tap it. Is there lakes around, and you don't have to give up the names, are there lakes like that where it's like you might hold a tournament for like a big fisherman because it's like, oh my God, this place is just so damn good, even though it's small?
100%. And like we have two kind of like what you mentioned. One is the Raleigh Rumble. So Central Carolina does that. They're tiny little lakes, but you can get 30-pound bags for sure.
That's insane.
I mean, they're there. I don't think I've. But there's one. I mean, it takes 100 inches to win it.
Damn,
no question. Yeah. The Gate City Classic is another one. So it's all the Greensboro lakes. So Oak Hollow, Lake Townsend, Lake Brant, High Point City Lake. Sometimes they throw in a max, sometimes they don't. Randleman sometimes. I mean, Randleman can put out. I mean, that's a crazy lake. It too has a non-motorized section. So look that one up. If you have a boat, go to the southern end. If you don't have a boat, go to the northern end, and they can both play and they can both put out 30-pound bags.
That's crazy
McIntosh,
to think about, that you drove to Texas for lakes that are probably just as good right here in your backyard.
Oh, 100%. I mean, McIntosh, that's the one everybody knows here. There was questions about it because actually a little side piece, the 6-pound test IGFA world record flathead was caught in McIntosh this spring.
Damn.
Like 65, 70 pounds, somewhere in there.
That was not
so there
on
was
purpose.
concern.
That
was a crappie fisherman in March. I'll have to share a picture of that sometime. I think it got confirmed. I know the biologist got the ear bone for it and did studies on. They have that, so it was confirmed. At least that the catch was legal and all that. Whether they addressed it or acknowledged it, I don't know if it's still going through the system. But anyways, they did the surveys on Mac, and it was kind of a weird spawn this year, and I think they're getting some funky numbers. But I got all these questions about, like, is McIntosh down? Like, should I be worried about McIntosh or the flatheads like killing all the bass? Blah 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 blah. And I'm like, I told Seth, the biologist, Seth, I said, every single year, look at this in the kayak world. I said, every single year, minimum 95 inches to win, minimum 21-inch big bass. It's usually a 22. I won actually Mac this year. I think it was 98 inches, 96. I can't remember what it was, but 100 inches. That is a lake, I will say, that has the quantity and quality. It's a rare gem that has both. I've not seen a true giant out of there. A lot of 5s and 6s. On a rare case, I think I've seen up to an 8 or 9. But it's just a ton of really fun, 4 to 6 pounders you can tussle with.
Oh, guys, if you haven't yet, if you're on the border of Virginia or in the DMV area, because I mean, guys know we commute like shit. Like, it's insane how much we drive. So we don't mind driving to the Carolinas. Instead of driving to Bugs, drive to one of these cooler lakes that haven't been talked about, that you can actually catch something over, a pound. And then also link in the episode description, everything that we talked about today. If you'd like to, go check us out on Patreon. As you guys know, in 2025, we're starting Casting for Conservation to help do supplemental stocking of our local waterways and helping out our different marinas, because there's a lot of shitty boat docks out there that need a little love. Like, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.